probably qualifies as that time of the year where there's still plenty of what have you going on with free agency. There's still moves that can be made. And one such move took place during this week, but we'll get in that in a minute. Of course, let me bring in the man I call my personal champion on this show, Big Cat Country's own, Travis Holmes. What's going on, my man?
I'm doing well, sir. Yeah, it's been an exciting NFL week, weirdly. And it's not the first week of free agency, and it's not draft week, but we got news. All right, let's go.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, it happened last week when we were talking about Foye Oluokun, and unfortunately, too much negative was brought up and associated with that as much as, hey, Foye got paid. Can we celebrate that? Which we did. I'm glad to say. I mean, you got to be realistic. But another element, too, that's come out and gotten Jaguar fans tweeting and chirping and on their own right on the heels of Texans fans precisely losing their mind, and rightly so. Stephon Diggs is a Texan officially, too. It's funny. The most valuable part of that trade is connected to draft picks for not this year, but next year. And obviously there's some lower picks in this coming draft as well. But I mean, the casual fan will be like, who cares about that, as much? And I know that there's noise made. Well, that's if you put those two picks together, golly, that's about a third round pick. No one cares. No one cares.
I mean, that's facts.
I mean, you and I obviously care about it as people who track things. But when you start chirping like Texan fans about, oh, well, the 5 and 6 combined, that's a third. No one cares. What they do care about is that Texans team continues to build in the offseason. Now, this is obviously not a Texans podcast. And listen, my dude, the Chubby Brown Bear on Twitter, a.k.a. VT, part of the Catch 22 Houston Texans podcast, he did his fanboy stuff. And listen, I even tweeted right at him. If he sees this, I have no problem with that. I tweeted right at him. I knew you'd be chirping, and I can't get mad at it. Listen, the Texans got better, and the Jags fan base is worried about it. So here's my question to you, Travis, is as somebody who covers and works with and deals with the Duval devout, such as we do out on the socials, and providing you information as we like to do, providing you insight as we do, what does this make more important, the Jags' defensive undertakings, or is the hope to join the rest of the AFC South arms race, which we've talked about this a few weeks back? This even bled into the Student of the Game episode with Jamal St. Cyr,
right? Talking
about this kind of morphing and transmogrification of the AFC South to a pass-happy division. What say you?
Well, that's interesting, man. You could argue both sides. You could argue that this is an arms race on offense, and we just got to get significantly better on offense to outscore, all the other AFC South offenses, and you wouldn't be wrong. But you could also equally make that same argument that, hey, we got to get better on defense. We got to try to limit these teams scoring, and there's no wrong answer here, but it's absolutely an arms race, and there's a lot of clenched butt cheeks, and there's a lot of arguing. And there's a lot of arguing on this cornerback versus wide receiver versus, whether it's a number one or just loading up conversation within Duval County right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a solid answer on it because it really just depends on who's going to be there at 17. And unfortunately, we're all kind of stuck waiting for that to happen to find out what's the right answer.
Yeah, because we are late enough in free agency to know that people are going to be and are thinking what they're thinking for the most part, unless, strange things happen. Like, for example, T. Higgins is still out there. That's still a thing that might happen. There's still a lot of talk around Brandon Ayuk. I'm not so sure that he leaves the 49ers at this point. I feel like that's the kind of thing where if teams thought he was as valuable as his camp did, that there would have been that payment by now. But that's another conversation. Obviously, that would involve a trade as well. So that could make it, where the Niners are asking for too much. Who knows? There's a lot of physics there. T. Higgins is the same kind of thing, I think.
It's weird. I don't know that they want to trade T. Higgins. So that's the.
Well, they don't want to.
Yeah. So that's
there's no way they could pay that many guys, right?
But then the Ayuk conversation is a different one because it feels more like they might actually legitimately be open to it because of how steadfast they are on being that running offense anyway. In either case, and just draft and replace. So that seems like one that has a higher potential to actually go through at least.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, in a Shanahan offense, Ayuk is kind of more of a luxury than is a necessity. Whereas T. Higgins, you can make the argument he's far more necessary to the success of one Joey Burr.
Right. It's just so many weapons, and eventually you got to make a decision on who to pay and who not to pay, and that's an interesting one because they paid Debo first. So
considering, and let me tie the Jags in here, considering how Browning did with what we've talked about as among the most underrated, if not the outright best skill group in the NFL last year, in the Bengals, carrying Browning to some extent. Browner. No, that's the fans of the team in Cleveland. That has to have raised T. Higgins' value, which also has made him kind of unattainable, one would argue, by a front office like the Jags, who have shown they're not wanting to pay superior amounts of cash, to go get a guy. Well, and let me ask this. Yeah, let me ask this, because the Texans are seen as wheeling and dealing and taking big swings. Not to say they haven't. The fan base of the Jags has kind of responded, well, why can't we do that? Why do you think that is, Travis? And I know the first answer is going to be Trent Baalke, and I'm not mad at you if that is it, but elaborate, please.
I'm not going to even say Trent Baalke necessarily.
What?
Well, because I say necessarily, because there can be a billion reasons. Like, there's no guarantee that this wasn't something that they were discussing something else, and it just happened. The deal just happened to go down in the way that it went down. Like, hey, we offered this. There's no guarantee that Trent Baalke was even aware of this trade happening until it happened.
They did an excellent job of keeping it under wraps until it was done.
Right. So there's some conversations there's obviously some conversation on that, whether or not that was that Jaguars would even be a team that Buffalo would have been interested in making that trade for, which is a whole different conversation. In addition to, maybe the Jaguars weren't interested because they had other things that they were working on, and maybe that second round pick is something that was earmarked for something else. You never know these things until sometimes years down the line. Sometimes the rumors don't even come out. So overall, I can't blame a GM for something that they may or may not have even been aware of. Not to mention, it ended up becoming basically essentially a 1-year deal for a second round draft pick.
But the following year too, at that, like, listen, if the Texans do as well as expected, that let's say that we'll conservatively say that it would be in the 20s somewhere, a second round draft pick somewhere in the mid to late 20s for Stephon Diggs.
It's not bad, because and Stephon Diggs at around $22 million a year. Okay, that's not bad at all when you have the Titans paying Calvin Ridley essentially that amount.
And Stephon Diggs ain't dropping the football like that down the field.
Correct. And this is a Pro Bowl All-Pro receiver. Like, consistently, he is over 30, but nevertheless, he's still around Calvin Ridley's age. So this is not so out of whack, as this is a team that just did very well in their first year, having a rookie quarterback and surrounding that rookie quarterback with some elite talent. And if you don't want to call him elite, we'll call him a top tier talent. And people already struggled stopping this offense last year with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Like, goodness gracious, that's a rough. People felt some kind of way about the Titans getting DeAndre Hopkins last year, and I'm like, all right, that was a little bit of a trepidation, but then people got over it. I don't know how people get over this. This is different. We have to be able to acknowledge that.
For one, the Texans have shown. Let's give the most conservative props to CJ Stroud. I already have him in the top 10, but I couldn't tell you where exactly. I haven't put that much of a thought experiment into it. But name me, even the biggest CJ Stroud hater reasonably would have him in the top 15 quarterbacks in the league, correct?
I believe that would
tell me the last time the Tennessee Titans had that. That's why the DeAndre Hopkins trade didn't make that much of the move. Moreover, comparatively, D-Hop was relatively washed compared to where Stephon Diggs is now. right? This is not me dissing DeAndre Hopkins. He had been the number one seed receiver at both of his previous stops. Let me be clear. Now granted, one of those stops where DeAndre Hopkins was slowed by Shaquille Griffin ended up getting Christian Kirk in the building when he beat the bejesus out of the Jags that day. But that's a separate conversation.
But that's how it happens with all these receivers, man. Gabe Davis put up a big game against the Jaguars, then all of a sudden he's on the Jaguars. Christian Kirk puts up a big game against the Jaguars, all of a sudden he's on the Jaguars.
You didn't put that together until you just said that. That's a great point by you.
That's their scouting.
You know what? Maybe I need to check them stats and bring that to him directly when I see him up here in one of these camps here. Talk to him, whether it's news here for the Duval Dive, the Student of the Game, or the Black and Gold Banneret. Triple bing! My voice is still messed up. I can't. Bing! It's better. It's just not perfect. Anyways, so but here's kind of what I'm getting at, and let me just pull the Band-Aid off of this point I'm trying to engage on.
Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of Duval out there. Well, why can't the Jags do this? It's very simple. There's 3 reasons the Jags aren't in a position to make a swing like that. Okay. Reason number 1 is Trevor Lawrence. They're going to be extending him soon. Okay? That's as inevitable as Thanos. I don't see the Jags as an organization having the audacity to, let's say in this draft, I'm saying this won't happen, people, but if they were really out on Trevor Lawrence, the move is to package him in a trade to get a top pick and get the quarterback of the future in this draft. I don't think anybody would argue that. Obviously, you wouldn't do that, but if they were actually not going to extend Trevor Lawrence in the near future, that would be the move because he's going to need that contract real soon. Right. And someone is backing up the Brinks truck for sunshine. I don't think anybody's arguing that, right? It's the reason number 1. Number 2, the other side of the ball. You know the reason Shorty has the same name as a former Stephon Diggs quarterback, but it's Josh Allen on the defensive end. The guy who I've written personally for the Jaguar Report, bing, that the quarterback called scary. He may have my name, but I think he's scary. He didn't say it like that, but he did use the word scary to describe him. The punchline is this. That contract's coming. And on this show and on other shows, you and I have both said, by the way, Andre Cisco, Tyson Campbell, Travis Etienne will not be a Jaguar in 3 years. It makes me sad. Okay? So all of that being said, reason number 2 is Josh Allen. Reason number 3, and here's going to be my controversial thing, my hot take, if you will. Urban Meyer. That's right, I said it. Urban Meyer. Why would I say that? Great question, Travis. Urban Meyer having literally the worst coaching stint possibly in NFL history, if not at least in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars, made it look so undesirable that to give Trevor Lawrence and Marvin Jones at the time help, you had to overpay Christian Kirk. You had to overpay Zay Jones. You had to overpay Evan Ingram to keep them all interested and coming to this town.
Sure.
Okay? That otherwise, who wants to be a part of a rebuild following the worst coaching job in a franchise, if not the league's history? And because they had to do that and overpay guys to end up in, second tier market Jacksonville as part of what was perceived as a rebuild. And at the time, they may have secured Doug Peterson by then. That's the only bargaining chip. By the way, Trent Baalke's name in and of itself couldn't have made it any better. There's plenty of press out there that said that the reason Byron Leftwich didn't come back to coach the team over Doug Peterson was because first he said, "No, I ain't working with Baalke." That's the one thing Trent Baalke has done in that time, among some other high-level picks, obviously. But as the great and wise Tony Wiggins reminds us on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, bing, drafting in the first round is easy drafting.
Right.
Okay? So he's gotten those high picks right. And as much as people have hated Trayvon Walker, he's gotten that right. The best thing he did so far could be argued to get Doug Peterson in the building after being directly linked by Byron Leftwich himself, allegedly, to push away Byron Leftwich and all that. And listen, I even talked to Maurice Jones-Drew about that the year during that offseason, during the leading up to the Super Bowl before that offseason, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
He would have loved to see Byron there, he told me. But punchline's this. Those are my three things. The reason why Jacksonville can't take a swing like that is because, or at least with a free agent, we'll get to some of that other stuff in a minute. But Trevor Lawrence extension, Josh Allen extension, among others, and still recovering and I'll put air quotes, overpaying guys to attract talented receivers post Urban Meyer.
But I would counter that argument, and I will say that you may make some good points. However, players know, man. The players know. And this is the fun part about this is the players, when you talk to them, when you interview them, when you kick it with them, they will always act. If you're on the record, they're going to act like, hey man, I don't pay attention to the social media. Yeah, I don't pay attention to the social media stuff. I don't read all this stuff. I mean, I don't look at football outside of the. And then you talk to them off the record or privately, and it's like, oh no, they see it all. They commented, and recently we saw just this past week, Christian Kirk. He's talking about why on Twitter, why he's catching strays every time some big news happens in the receiver bar, because obviously he's seeing it. You have Josh Allen who's liking comments from the fans talking about the fact that the Houston Texans are going all in and surrounding their quarterback with talent and actually doing these things that you should be doing to have a competitive team, in comparison to the Jaguars not doing those things. And that's obviously the players are seeing it. It's just interesting to finally see them comment on it, and maybe not publicly comment, but at least have those lights. You can see that they agree with these opinions of the GM. And you heard those rumors last year when there was, hey, this guy's a Trevor Lawrence guy. This guy's a Doug Peterson guy, whereas this guy's a Trent Baalke guy, or Mike Caldwell, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you have those guys that have opinions. They are not robots.
Right.
So it's just interesting finally seeing some of that. So I say all that to say, these free agents also know, man. These other players at other teams, they're calling players who they previously played with in college. They previously played them at a different spot, and they know, baby, they got Trent Baalke over there. And if you're not someone who's played with Trent Baalke, you're going to go with what he is viewed as around the NFL circles.
I think we decided that within this show that Trent Baalke's part of the reason that Stephon Diggs may not have been interested.
Yeah, he may not want to. That may be the thing. So that's the interesting part about this is, man, I don't know how to feel about that, because if these guys have feelings.
I'm gonna let you move on. I'm gonna let you finish, but I want to make that point right here. I don't think that's something that has enough noise made about it in and of itself, right? How much of a deterrent is Trent Baalke himself? I cited Byron Leftwich earlier, but for all these other free agents, like I get that you bring an offensive lineman in the building,
right?
And I like the Morse pickup. I'm not dismissing it at all, but he's an offensive lineman. He don't care the same way that these air quotes skill players do. I say air quotes because you tiny people calling what we do not skilled is a slur, and it's unacceptable. Okay,
hey man, it's a slur calling us tiny people. We better calm down. But I got you.
Hey, physics is physics, right? Listen, I've seen you throw blocks too in flag football games, my friend. I know you ain't no punk, but the punchline is that if all the good points we're gonna make, everyone's gonna remember. Hey, the student of the game said Travis isn't a punk. Isn't that awesome? Anyways, no, but yes, welcome to the Duval dive where Travis isn't a punk. No, but see, someone's gonna clip that. I know it. It might even be you. I don't know.
Probably.
Listen, I make jokes, but yeah, I know. I think that's something we as a media base needs to kind of make more noise about. Hey, if it's Trent Baalke that is making players balk about coming to Jacksonville, that's something that needs to get on Shah Khan's radar sooner than later. And the only way it does, if you are truly displeased about it as a member of the Duval Devout media, you need to start chirping about, hey, the deterrent for why you can't make those swings might be him to some extent.
But the problem with that conversation is you can't have that conversation until the bank account is low. Trent's always had a Scrooge McDuck bank account in all these situations, so he can always pay more than the next guy. And as long as he had Trevor on that rookie contract, he can pay more, or even arguably the same with a tax-free situation as every other team. And at the end of the day, money's almost always going to make or break any kind of ties with these players. So now it's going to get harder when your money starts getting tight and you get into a situation where you've extended Josh Allen or you've extended Trevor Lawrence. And now that bank account, which is your get out of jail free card for bad draft picks and bad team management in the past, is now dried up. Now it's going to come down to those attributes of, all right, is this a good ownership group? Is this a good general manager? Is this a good coaching staff? Where does my fit go in all these tiebreaker situations? And that's what you're going to lose every time, because your GM is negatively viewed as a bottom 5 GM in the NFL.
And that's precisely the point I think we're making, and why now is the time to point it out if you're one of these that believes this way, okay? Because the Texans have shown us, listen, that franchise was supposed to be completely ruined for at least a decade after what went down with Deshaun Watson. Now, granted, it's not just the Jags, okay? Listen, the Browns made decisions so god-awfully bad that they uplifted the Houston Texans. For all the first rounders that they gave up just to get Deshaun Watson in their building, and what is beyond any doubt that I can think of, and if somebody's got an example, tweet at me at the SOTG if you're listening on the podcast, right? Somebody tweet at me a deal they might think is worse, okay? And no, I'm not counting the Carolina Panthers, because at the end of the day, we haven't seen Bryce Young's contract yet. Deshaun Watson's contract is the worst in the history of sport, because now they're tied to a guy that not only is scandalous AF out there in PR, but also is underperforming to beat hell. For the love of God, you stole the most improved comeback player of the year award from DeMar Hamlin for the guy that had to take that team to the playoffs because Watson was hurt and also underperforming before that time. Then over and above that, the Texans were kept alive by other things too, but mostly for getting both CJ Stroud and Tank Dell and Nico Collins still on rookie deals, so they could bring in Stephon Diggs, keep Laramie Tunsil, upgrade their defense, and be the odds-on favorite at this point, granted it's only April, favorites in the AFC South. And that GM action, that ability to bring in things on the draft so they didn't have to bail themselves out, but instead could use money to augment the forces they have, is why that they've left the Jags in the dust in the course of what, 3 years?
I mean,
that's Travis.
That's what it takes. It takes aggressive and smart general managing, and that's no different than Brad Holmes up in Detroit. That's no different. There's a lot of these younger GMs who are willing to take those educated risks, and that's not to say that Trent Baalke has, like, he did the Ridley deal, and I gave him a hand clap for that. But then it's a bad deal when you turn it around and all of a sudden you can't walk and chew gum and you end up screwing yourself on it by not extending Josh Allen. Right. So then you any benefit that you got from doing the Ridley deal, you've already peed that away on the side of a building because you just simply couldn't close it.
I think the bigger point I'm making though here is in the NFC South, you'd be able to skate on weaker performances in the front office, because who were some of the franchises you were Jim Irsay, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
That he wasted Andrew Luck's career. I don't have to say another thing about that.
Yeah, train wreck.
And the Titans, with all due respect, they have artificially, in my opinion, gone further than they should have on the strength of a coach that they've now fired. And listen, I'm not knocking Coach Callahan. I'm very interested to see what he does in his first year. But putting all your chips on the table for Will Levis, I have a feeling that's not going to go great for you to start out with. I'm just throwing that out there, okay? Listen,
I think they have a shorter leash than anyone's talking about for Will Levis. I think that's why they're really building that offense around him quickly and early with this second-year GM, because they want to find out what they have.
When you put it that way, that's a great thing. Listen, for all of his ego and all his other, I'm going to say antics, for lack of a better way to put it. I mean, it's not like he's in trouble with the cops or, doing stuff that Baker Mayfield did in his past. No offense to Baker Mayfield, as I like to call him. Like, he's turned his career around, and I'm not going to say he got overpaid by the Bucs, but one could argue he got overpaid by the Bucs. But all of that to say, maybe Will Levis is something, and I will have to eat a very large piece of humble pie for one of the biggest mistakes I've made since Cam Newton. That's all on the table. I'll grant that. But if he doesn't perform here, Travis, with this group that's built up, then guess what? That's just another instance of a front office getting it wrong. by bringing in, you haven't had a good quarterback in Tennessee, or at least I shouldn't say Tannehill was good. You haven't had a great quarterback in Tennessee since Steve McNair. Facts of the case, okay?
Not wrong, but I think they could legitimately be one off season from bringing in another quarterback, and that's not to say he has to play bad. It's just to say I think that they want to know what they got, and I understand that's what you're supposed to do, and in the order you're supposed to do it.
Or when you see a draft that has allegedly all these generational quarterbacks, you say, "Nah, I'm good," and stick with Will Levis. That says more to me about your front office than anything else. I hear what you're saying, and you're not wrong, but come on, man.
I don't know that any of these guys are truly generational in this draft. The fact that they were so close in this draft it says something to me, at least. The fact that no one closed the door on that argument and none of them were just that guy in that way.
Other than Michael Penix, but we don't have to have that conversation right now. The disrespect for Michael Penix out there is beyond measure for me, Travis Holmes.
That is fair.
We'll talk more about that on the student of the game. Bing. Anyways. But yeah, that's what I'm saying is what's going on with the Texans, I believe, is now going to raise the expectation and the bar for the rest of the front offices in the division. And I got to tell you, if I'm the owner of any of these teams, and of course this being the Duval dive, I'm speaking directly to Shad Khan. If you can't see that writing on the wall that the Texans have put themselves in the position to perennially whoop your ass, and you're not at least thinking about a change, you're doing it wrong.
I mean, Shaw's going to be pissed when he finds out that this trade happened 3 months ago. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting, but for sure. I think he does raise the Diggs trade does raise the expectations, obviously for Houston, but absolutely raises the expectations for the Jaguars, who already squandered their chance at that championship, at the AFC South championship last season.
Yeah.
So now, if they truly are the favorites, they being the Texans truly, in my opinion, are the favorites to win the division next year, that's a rough way of entering the season. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard uphill battle. It's not to say they can't do it. I actually do believe that they could, and I can see a route to that. We'll talk about that on the future episode. But yeah, I still see that there is a route to them splitting with the Texans in spite of all of this, and that's just my hopium. That's a massive dose of grade A uncut hopium.
I love that.
I'm here for it. So we will have to get into the how can the Jaguars and where do the Jaguars win against the Texans team before the draft even occurs?
Well, I'll say this. We'll be back next week to deliver some more doses, hopefully of hopium, as the draft continues to approach. Travis Holmes, tell the world where you could be found.
You can find me on all the socials. Travis D. Holmes here. Threads, Facebook, Twitter, Discord, whatever. You can find my writings covering the Jaguars on bigcatcountry.com. We have the post up from yesterday, Houston, we have a problem. The Jaguars free agency tracker, and also if anyone's interested, we also have the write-up of the Jaguars free agency, the cheaper options that are still available. A few of those guys on that list that may be able to help this Jaguars team without breaking the bank. So take a look on that.
I like that the Big Cat Country has offered that, because that's what you need at this point to show the Duval devout. Of course, some of us wrote about T. Higgins being interested in playing with Trevor Lawrence weeks ago with the Jaguar Report. Bing! So there's that. Of course, I'm Kyle Nash, the student of the game. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at the SOTG. Find me on Facebook as a student of the game. Check out my writing with Jaguar Report, Black and Gold Banner, and the 3-point conversion, as well as my work covering the Orlando Magic with the 3-point conversion at A7BN Sports. And also the Student of the Game podcast, Wednesdays, just the same place where you found this, 9 o'clock Eastern. Good time all the way around. An honor, joy, and privilege. But until next time, everyone, class dismissed.